到讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第33節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Of the delectable discourse which the Duchess and her damsels held with Sancho Panza, well worth reading and noting。 咁上一回咧就講侍從兩人喺伯爵夫婦家中作為上賓，得到好好嘅禮遇。但係咧，當中咧都不乏笑話，譬如咧啲侍女咧就群起咧去清洗 Don Quixote 嘅鬍鬚啦，開個少少嘅玩笑。另一方面，伯爵夫婦又會問 Don Quixote 究竟佢有冇見過Dulcinea de Toboso 佢嘅情人。Don Quixote 又講出咗佢係俾巫師攞咒語呢啲咁樣嘅風言風語。仲有咧就係 Sancho 啦，非常之羨慕佢嘅主人嗰個鬍鬚得到清洗。但係咧，另一方面又好不忿啲下人用啲污糟水去洗佢，佢覺得咧唔乾淨，於是乎咧就走嚟走去。咁啊，上一節嘅最後咧就係 Don Quixote 小睡一回，呢個伯爵夫人咧就召喚 Sancho 咧去陪佢傾下偈啦。咁呢一節就睇下伯爵夫人同 Sancho 有啲咩對話。
The history records that Sancho did not sleep that afternoon.But in order to keep his word came, before he had well done dinner, to visit the Duchess, who, finding enjoyment in listening to him, made him sit down beside her on a low seat, though Sancho, out of pure good breeding, wanted not to sit down. The Duchess, however, told him he was to sit down as governor and talk as squire, as in both respects he was worthy of, even the chair of the Theatre Diaz de Campeador. Sancho shrugged his shoulders, obeyed, and sat down.And all the Duchess's damsels and duennas gathered round him, waiting in profound silence and hear what he would say. It was the Duchess, however, who spoke first, saying, "Now that we are alone, and that there is nobody here to overhear us, I should be glad if the Signor Governor would relieve me of certain doubts I have, rising out of the history of the great Don Quixote that is now in print. One is, inasmuch as worthy Sancho never saw Dulcinea, I mean the Lady Dulcinea de Toboso,nor took Don Quixote's letter to her, for it was left in the memorandum book in the Sierra Morena. How did he dare to invent the answer and all that about finding her sifting wheat, the whole story being a deception and falsehood, and so much to the prejudice of the peerless Dulcinea's good name, a thing that is not at all becoming the character and fidelity of a good squire?" At these words, Sancho, without uttering one in reply, got up from his chair, and with noiseless steps, with his body bent and his fingers on his lips, went all round the room, lifting up the hangings, and this done, he came back to his seat and said, "Now, Signora, that I have seen that there is no one except the bystanders listening to us on the sly, I would answer what you have asked me, and all you may ask me, without fear or dread. And the first thing I have got to say is, that for my own part I told my master Don Quixote to be stark mad, though sometimes he says things that, to my mind, and indeed everybody's that listens to him, are so wise, and run in such a straight furrow, that Satan himself could not have said them better. But for all that, really, and beyond all question, it's my firm belief he's cracked. Well then, as this is clear to my mind, I can venture to make him believe things that have neither head nor tail, like that affair of the answer to the letter, and that other of 6 or 8 days ago, which is not yet in history, that is to say, the affair of the enchantment of my Lady Dulcinea, for I made him believe she is enchanted, though there is no more truth in it than over the hills of Ubeda. The Duchess begged him to tell her about the enchantment or deception, so Sancho told the whole story exactly as it happened, and his hearers were not a little amused by it. And then resuming, the Duchess said, "In consequence of what worthy Sancho has told me, a doubt starts up in my mind, and there comes a kind of whisper to my ear that says, if Don Quixote be mad, crazy, and cracked, and Sancho Panza his squire knows it, and notwithstanding serves and falls him, and goes trusting to his empty promises, there can be no doubt he must be still madder and sillier than his master, and that being so, it will be cast in your teeth, Signora Duchess, if you give the said Sancho an island to govern, for how will he who does not know how to govern himself know how to govern others?" "By God, Signora," said Sancho, "but that doubt comes timely, but your grace may say it out, and speak plainly, or as you like, for I know what you say is true. And if I were wise, I should have left my master long ago. But this was my fate, this was my bad luck. I can't help it, I must follow him. We're from the same village. I've eaten his bread. I'm fond of him. I'm grateful. He gave me his ass coats. And above all, I'm faithful. So it's quite impossible for anything to separate us, except the pickaxe and shovel. And if your highness does not like to give me the government you promised, God made me without it. And maybe your not giving it to me will be all the better for my conscience. For fool as I am, I know the proverb, to her hurt the ant got wings. And it may be that Sancho the squire will get to heaven sooner than Sancho the governor. They make as good bread here as in France, and by night all cats are grey. And a hard case enough his, who hasn't broken his fast at 2 in the afternoon, and there's no stomach a hand's breadth bigger than another, and the same can be filled with straw or hay, as the saying is, and the little birds of the field have God for their purveyor and caterer. And 4 yards of Coenza frieze keep one warmer than 4 of Segovia broadcloth. And when we quit this world and are put underground, the prince travels by as narrow a path as a journeyman, and the Pope's body does not take up more feet of earth than the sacristan's, for all that the one is higher than the other. For when we go to our graves, we all pack ourselves up and make ourselves small, or rather they pack us up and make us small in spite of us, and then good night to us. And I say once more, if your ladyship does not like to give me the island because I'm a fool, like a wise man, I will take care to give myself no trouble about it. I have heard say that behind the cross there's the devil, and that all that glitters is not gold, and that from among the oxen and the ploughs and the yokes, Wamba the husbandman was taken to be made king of Spain, and from among brocades and pleasures and riches, Roderick was taken to be devoured by adders, if the verses of the old ballad don't lie. To be sure, they don't lie, exclaimed Donna Rodriguez, the duenna, who was one of the listeners. Why, there's a ballad that says they put King Rodrigo alive into a tomb full of toads and adders and lizards, and that 2 days afterwards the king, in a plaintive feeble voice, cried out from within the tomb, They know me now, there where I most did sin. And according to that, the gentleman has good reason to say he would rather be a labouring man than a king, if vermin are to eat him. The Duchess could not help laughing at the simplicity of a duenna, or wondering at the language and proverbs of Sancho, to whom she said, Worthy Sancho knows very well that when once a knight has made a promise, he strives to keep it, though it should cost him his life. My lord and husband, the Duke, though not one of the errant sort, is none the less a knight for that reason, and will keep his word about the Promised Island, in spite of the envy and malice of the world. Let Sancho be of good cheer, for when he least expects it, he finds himself seated on the throne of his island and seat of dignity, and will take possession of his government that he may discard it for another of 3-bordered brocade. The charge I give him is to be careful how he governs his vassals, bearing in mind that they are all loyal and well-born. As to governing them well, said Sancho, there's no need of charging me to do that, for I am kind-hearted by nature, and full of compassion for the poor. There's no stealing the loaf from him who needs and bakes, and by my faith, it won't do to throw false dice with me. I'm an old dog. I know all about tuss-tuss. I can be wide awake if need be, and I don't let clouds come before my eyes, for I know where the shoe pinches me. I say so because with me the good will have support and protection, and the bad neither footing nor access. And it seems to me that in governments to make a beginning is everything, and maybe, after having been governor a fortnight, I'll take kindly to the work and know more about it than the field labour I have been brought up to. You are right, Sancho, said the Duchess, for no one is born ready taught, and bishops are made out of men and not out of stones. But to return to the subject we were discussing just now, the enchantment of the Lady Dulcinea, I look upon it as certain, and something more than evident, that Sancho's idea of practicing a deception upon his master, making him believe that the peasant girl was Dulcinea, and that if he did not recognize her, it must be because she was enchanted, was all the device of one of the enchanters that persecute Don Quixote. For in truth and earnest, I know from good authority that the coarse country wench who jumped up on the ass was and is Dulcinea de Toboso, and that worthy Sancho, though he fancies himself the deceiver, is the one that is deceived, and that there is no more reason to doubt the truth of this than of anything else we never saw. Signor Sancho Panza must know that we too have enchanters here that are well disposed to us, and tell us what goes on in the world, plainly and distinctly, without subterfuge or deception. And believe me, Sancho, that agile country lass was and is Dulcinea de Toboso, who is as much enchanted as the mother that bore her, and when we least expect it, we shall see her in her own proper form, and then Sancho will be disabused of the error he is under at present. All that's very possible, said Sancho Panza, and now I'm willing to believe what my master says about what he saw in the cave of Montesinos, where he says he saw the lady Dulcinea de Toboso in the very same dress and apparel that I said I had seen her in, when I enchanted her all to please myself. It must be all exactly the other way, as your ladyship says, because it is impossible to suppose that out of my poor wit such a cunning trick could be concocted in a moment. Nor do I think my master is so mad that by my weak and feeble persuasion he could be made to believe a thing so out of all reason. But, Senora, your excellence must not therefore think me ill-disposed, for a dolt like me is not bound to see into the thoughts and plots of those vile enchanters. I've invented all that to escape my master's scolding, and not with any intention of hurting him. And if it has turned out differently, there is a God in heaven who judges our hearts. That is true, said the Duchess. But tell me, Sancho, what is this you say about the cave of Montesinos? For I should like to know. Sancho upon this related to her, word for word, what has been said already touching that adventure, and having heard it, the Duchess said, From this occurrence it may be inferred that, as the great Don Quixote says he saw there the same country wench Sancho saw on the way from El Toboso, it is, no doubt, Dulcinea, and that there are some very active and exceedingly busy enchanters about. So I say, said Sancho, and if my lady Dulcinea is enchanted, so much the worse for her, and I am not going to pick a quarrel with my master's enemies, who seem to be many and spiteful. The truth is that the one I saw was a country wench, and I set her down to be a country wench, and if that was Dulcinea, it must not be laid at my door, nor should I be called to answer for it or take the consequences. But they must go nagging at me at every step. Sancho said it, Sancho did it, Sancho here, Sancho there, as if Sancho was nobody at all, and not that same Sancho Panza that's now going all over the world in books, so Samson Carrasco told me, and he's at any rate one that's a bachelor of Salamanca, and people of that sort can't lie, except when the whim seizes them, or they have some very good reason for it. So there's no occasion for anybody to quarrel with me, and then I have a good character, and as I have heard my master say, a good name is better than great riches. Let them only stick me into this government, and they'll see wonders, for one who has been a good squire will be a good governor. All worthy Sancho's observations, said the Duchess, are Catonian sentences, or at any rate out of the very heart of Michael Verino himself, who
Florentibus occiditannis.
In fact, to speak in his own style, under a bad cloak there's often a good drinker. Indeed, Senora, said Sancho, I never yet drank out of wickedness. From thirst I have very likely, for I have nothing of the hypocrite in me. I drink when I'm inclined, or, if I'm not inclined, when they offer it to me, so as not to look either straight-laced or ill-bred. For when a friend drinks one's health, what heart can be so hard as not to return it? But if I put on my shoes, I don't dirty them. Besides, squires to knights errant mostly drink water, for they are always wandering among woods, forests, and meadows, mountains and crags, without a drop of wine to be had if they gave their eyes for it. So I believe, said the Duchess, and now let Sancho go and take his sleep, and we will talk by and by at greater length, and settle how he may soon go and stick himself into the government, as he says. Sancho once more kissed the Duchess' hand, and entreated her to let good care be taken of his Dapple, for he was the light of his eyes. What is Dapple? Said the Duchess. My ass, said Sancho, which, not to mention him by that name, I am accustomed to call Dapple. I begged this lady Duenna here to take care of him when I came to the castle, and she got as angry as if I had said she was ugly or old, though it ought to be more natural and proper for duennas to feed asses than to ornament chambers. God bless me, what a spite a gentleman of my village had against these ladies. He must have been some clown, said Donna Rodriguez to Duenna, for if he had been a gentleman well born, he would have exalted them higher than the horns of the moon. That will do, said the Duchess. No more of this. Hush, Donna Rodriguez, and let Signora Panza rest easy and leave the treatment of Dapple in my charge, for as he is a treasure of Sancho's, I'll put them on the apple of my eye. It will be enough for him to be in the stable, said Sancho, for neither he nor I are worthy to rest a moment in the apple of your highness' eye, and I'd as soon stab myself as consent to it. For though my master says that in civilities it is better to lose by a card too many than a card too few, when it comes to civilities to asses, we must mind what we are about and keep within due bounds. Take him to your government, Sancho, said the Duchess, and there you will be able to make as much of him as you like, and even release him from work and pension him off.Don't think, Signora Duchess, that you have said anything absurd, said Sancho. I have seen more than 2 asses go to governments, and for me to take mine with me would be nothing new. Sancho's words made the Duchess laugh again and gave her fresh amusement, and dismissing him to sleep, she went away to tell the Duke the conversation she had had with him, and between them they plotted and arranged to play a joke upon Don Quixote that was to be a rare one and entirely in knight-errantry style, and in that same style they practised several upon him, so much in keeping and so clever that they formed the best adventures this great history contains.
好，呢一節咧就有一個比較深入啲嘅探訪，伯爵夫人對 Sancho 佢嘅內心，尤其是圍繞住到Dulcinea del Toboso呢個人物，有一個深度啲嘅理解有個拆解。Duchess 咧似乎都幾肯定 Sancho 咧係對於主人講大話嘅，佢所見嘅所謂Dulcinea del Toboso，其實佢只係一個串故，佢甚至乎咧冇遞交過 Don Quixote 嘅情書俾佢嘅。關於Dulcinea del Toboso呢個人物咧，實際上係唔存在，佢只係一個串故。咁但係另一方面咧，Don Quixote 就對 Dulcinea 係受到呢啲巫師落咗嘅咒語，令佢產生錯覺呢啲嘢咧係深信不疑。伯爵夫人咧就同 Sancho 講啦，既然你都認為你嘅主人咁愚蠢，唔認為呢啲咒語呢啲巫師啲事情，咁點解仲跟隨佢咧？你咁樣跟隨佢，其他人唔會取笑你，認為你比 Don Quixote 更愚蠢、更瘋狂咩？咁但係 Sancho 嘅回答咧就係話，佢唔會離開佢嘅主人，因為咧佢哋大家都嚟自同一條村，佢哋嘅關係咧實在太深厚啦。佢只係會跟隨到佢去最後，直至到死為止。Duchess 對於 Sancho 嘅呢一番話咧，我諗佢臨時都尊重嘅，似乎係用安慰嘅口吻咧，就同 Sancho 講啦：我哋身邊咧都有好多巫師。我相信咧，你遇到嘅呢個女仔咧，的確就係Dulcinea del Toboso，而佢咧甚至乎係中咗魔法、中咗咒語嘅。我都認為係咁。咁 Sancho 聽到伯爵夫人咁講咧，佢都放下深秋大石，得到人嘅認同。佢亦都有提到關於之前喺洞穴入面Don Quixote話佢見到嘅所有嘅事情啦，哪怕只係佢認為係幻覺，將一啲嘢咧都同伯爵夫人講咗。咁講完之後咧 ，Sancho 咧就語息重負，就去休息啦。伯爵夫人聽完呢啲嘢之後咧，佢就從伯爵佢講咗呢兩個人咧暗地裏決定同Don Quixote開一個大玩笑。咁我哋睇下下一節咧呢個玩笑會係啲咩？呢一節有一個字同大家分享 subterfuge，subterfuge，S-U-B-T-E-R-F-U-G-E， 名詞嚟嘅 ，deceit used in order to achieve one's goal， 詭計。啲花招詭計啦，咁樣 subterfuge。好，我哋呢一節嚟到呢度，下一節再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅 Chapter 34。呢一節嘅名叫做 Which relates how they learned the way in which they were to disenchant the peerless Dulcinea del Toboso, which is one of the rarest adventures in this book。咁上一回咧就講到伯爵夫人同 Sancho 私底下有對話啦。Sancho 就和盤托出啦，一直以嚟對於 Dulcinea del Toboso 所有嘢咧，其實都係誤會大話，就係佢對 Don Quixote 嘅大話。呢一個夢想中或者喺 Don Quixote 心目中嘅 Dulcinea del Toboso 咧係不存在嘅。Sancho 都認為佢嘅主人喺呢一方面係真係錯亂啊，可以咁講。現實中嘅Dulcinea del Toboso佢只係一個農家女孩。Duchess 嘅反應咧，竟然係話唔係嘅，我都相信農家女咧應該係中咗巫師嘅魔法嘅啫，又令到 Sancho 嘅良心過意得去。咁但係實際上 Duchess 其實就係想對Don Quixote開個玩笑。咁呢一節咧就睇下呢個玩笑咧可以開到幾大。
Good Great was the pleasure the Duke and Duchess took in the conversation of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, and more bent than ever upon the plan they had of practicing some jokes upon them that should have the look and appearance of adventures. They took as their basis of action what Don Quixote had already told them about the cave of Montesinos, in order to play him a famous one. But what the Duchess marveled at above all was that Sancho's simplicity could be so great as to make him believe as absolute truth that Dulcinea had been enchanted, when it was he himself who had been the enchanter and trickster in the business. Having therefore instructed their servants in everything they were to do, 6 days afterwards they took him out to hunt, with as great a retinue of huntsmen and beaters as a crowned king. They presented Don Quixote with a hunting suit, and Sancho with another of the finest green cloth, but Don Quixote declined to put his on, saying that he must soon return to the hard pursuit of arms, and could not carry wardrobes or stores with him. Sancho, however, took what they gave him, meaning to sell it at the first opportunity. The appointed day having arrived, Don Quixote armed himself, and Sancho arrayed himself, and mounted on his dapple. He placed himself in the midst of the troop of huntsmen. The Duchess came out splendidly attired, and Don Quixote, in pure courtesy and politeness, held the rein of her palfrey, though the Duke wanted not to allow him. And at last they reached a wood that lay between two high mountains, where, after occupying various posts, ambushes, and paths, and distributing the party in different positions, the hunt began with great noise, shouting and hallooing, so that between the baying of the hounds and the blowing of the horns, they could not hear one another. The Duchess dismounted, and with a sharp boar spear in her hand, posted herself where she knew the wild boars were in the habit of passing. The Duke and Don Quixote likewise dismounted and placed themselves one at each side of her. Sancho took up a position in the rear of all without dismounting from Dapple, whom he dared not desert lest some mischief should befall him. Scarcely had they taken their stand in a line with several of their servants when they saw a huge boar, closely pressed by the hounds and followed by the huntsmen, making towards them, grinding his teeth and tusks, and scattering foam from his mouth. As soon as he saw him, Don Quixote, bracing his shield on his arm and drawing his sword, advanced to meet him. The Duke with boar spear did the same, but the Duchess would have gone in front of them, or had not the Duke prevented her. Sancho alone, deserting Dapple at the sight of the mighty beast, took to his heels as hard as he could and strove in vain to mount a tall oak. As he was clinging to a branch, however, halfway up in his struggle to reach the top, the bow, such was his ill luck and hard fate, gave way, and caught in his fall by a broken limb of the oak, he hung suspended in the air, unable to reach the ground. Finding himself in this position, and that the green coat was beginning to tear, and reflecting that if the fierce animal came that way, he might be able to get at him, he began to utter such cries, and call for help so earnestly, that all who heard him and did not see him felt sure he must be in the teeth of some wild beast. In the end, the tusked boar fell pierced by the blades of the many spears they held in front of him, and Don Quixote, turning round at the cries of Sancho, for he knew by them that it was he, saw him hanging from the oak head downwards, with Dapple, who did not forsake him in his distress, close beside him. And Cid Hamete observes that he seldom saw Sancho Panza without seeing Dapple, or Dapple without seeing Sancho Panza. Such was their attachment and loyalty one to the other. Don Quixote went over and unhooked Sancho, who, as soon as he found himself on the ground, looked at the red in his hunting coat and was grieved to the heart, for he thought he had got a patrimonial estate in that suit. Meanwhile, they had slung the mighty boar across the back of a mule, and having covered it with sprigs of rosemary and branches of myrtle, they bore it away as the spoils of victory to some large field tents which had been pitched in the middle of the wood, where they found the tables laid and dinner served, in such grand and sumptuous style that it was easy to see the rank and magnificence of those who had provided it. Sancho, as he showed the rents in his torn suit to the Duchess, observed, "If we had been hunting hares or after small birds, my coat would have been saved from being in the plight it's in. I don't know what pleasure one can find in lying in wait for an animal that may take your life with his tusk if he gets at you. I recollect having heard an old ballad sung that says, 'By bears be thou devoured, as erst was famous Favilla.'" That, said Don Quixote, was a Gothic king who, going a-hunting, was devoured by a bear. Just so, said Sancho, and I would not have kings and princes expose themselves to such dangers for the sake of a pleasure which, to my mind, ought not to be won, as it consists in killing an animal that had done no harm whatever. Quite the contrary, Sancho, you are wrong there, said the Duke, for hunting is more suitable and requisite for kings and princes than for anybody else. The chase is the emblem of war. It has stratagems, wiles, and crafty devices for overcoming the enemy in safety. In an extreme cold and intolerable heat have to be borne. Indolence and sleep are despised. The bodily powers are invigorated. The limbs of him who engages in it are made supple. And in a word, it is a pursuit which may be followed without injury to anyone and with enjoyment to many. And the best of it is not for everybody, as field sports of other sorts are, except hawking, which also is only for kings and great lords. Reconsider your opinion, therefore, Sancho, and when you are governor, take to hunting, and you will find the good of it. Nay, said Sancho, the good governor should have a broken leg and keep at home. It would be a nice thing if, after people had been at the trouble of coming to look for him on business, the governor were to be away in the forest enjoying himself. The government would go on badly in that fashion. By my faith, senor, hunting and amusements are more fit for idlers than for governors. What I intend to amuse myself with is playing all fours at Easter time, and bowls on Sundays and holidays, for these huntings don't suit my condition or agree with my conscience. God grant it may turn out so, said Duke, because it's a long step from saying to doing. Be that as it may, said Sancho, pledges don't distress a good payer, and he whom God helps does better than he who gets up early, and it's the tribes that carry the feet and not the feet the tribes. I mean to say that if God gives me help and I do my duty honestly, no doubt I'll govern better than a gerfalcon. Nay, let them only put a finger in my mouth, and they'll see whether I can bite or not. The curse of God and all his saints upon thee, thou accursed Sancho, exclaimed Don Quixote. When will the day come, as I have often said to thee, when I shall hear thee make one single coherent, rational remark without proverbs? Pray, your highnesses, leave this fool alone, for he will grind your souls between, not to say 2, but 2,000 proverbs, dragged in as much in season, and as much to the purpose as. May God grant as much health to him, or to me if I want to listen to them. Sancho Panza's proverbs, said the Duchess, though more in number than the Greek commanders, are not therefore less to be esteemed for the consciousness of the maxims. For my own part, I can say they give me more pleasure than others that may be better brought in and more seasonably introduced. In pleasant conversation of this sort, they passed out of the tent into the wood, and a day was spent in visiting some of the posts and hiding places, and then night closed in. Not, however, as brilliantly or tranquilly as might have been expected at the season, for it was then midsummer, but bringing with it a kind of haze that greatly aided the project of the Duke and Duchess, and thus, as night began to fall, and a little after twilight set in, suddenly the whole wood on all 4 sides seemed to be on fire, and shortly after, here, there, on all sides, a vast number of trumpets and other military instruments were heard, as if several troops of cavalry were passing through the wood. The blaze of the fire and the noise of the warlike instruments almost blinded the eyes and deafened the ears of those that stood by, and indeed of all who were in the wood. Then there were heard repeated lilies after the fashion of the Moors when they rushed to battle. Trumpets and clarions brayed, drum beat, fifes played, so unceasingly and so fast that he could not have had any senses who did not lose them with the confused din of so many instruments. The Duke was astounded, the Duchess amazed, Don Quixote wondering, Sancho Panza trembling, and indeed even they who were aware of the cause were frightened. In their fear, silence fell upon them, and a postilion, in the guise of a demon, passed in front of them, blowing, in lieu of a bugle, a huge hollow horn that gave out a horrible hoarse note. "Ho there, brother courier!" cried the Duke. "Who are you? Where are you going? What troops are these that seem to be passing through the wood?" To which the courier replied in a harsh, discordant voice, "I am the devil. I am in search of Don Quixote of La Mancha. Those who are coming this way are 6 troops of enchanters, who are bringing on a trumful car the peerless Dulcinea de Toboso. She comes under enchantment, together with the gallant Frenchman Montesinos, to give instructions to Don Quixote as to how she, the said lady, may be disenchanted. If you were the devil, as you say and as your appearance indicates, said the Duke, you would have known the said knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, for you have him here before you. By God, and upon my conscience, said the devil, I never observed it, for my mind is occupied with so many different things that I was forgetting the main thing I came about. This demon must be an honest fellow and a good Christian, said Sancho, for if he wasn't he wouldn't swear by God and his conscience. I feel sure now there must be good souls even in hell itself. Without dismounting, the demon then turned to Don Quixote and said, The unfortunate but valiant knight Montesinos sends me to thee, the knight of the lions, bidding me tell thee to wait for him wherever I may find thee, as he brings with him her whom they call Dulcinea de Toboso, that he may show thee what is needful in order to disenchant her. And as I came for no more, I need stay no longer. Demons of my sort be with thee, and good angels with these gentles. And so saying, he blew his huge horn, turned about, and went off without waiting for a reply from anyone. They all felt fresh wonder, but particularly Sancho and Don Quixote. Sancho to see how, in defiance of the truth, they would have it that Dulcinea was enchanted. Don Quixote because he could not feel sure whether what had happened to him in the cave of Montesinos was true or not, and as he was deep in these cogitations, the Duke said to him, Do you mean to wait, Señor Don Quixote? Why not, replied he. Here will I wait, fearless and firm, though all hell should come to attack me. Well then, if I see another devil or hear another horn like the last, I'll wait here as much as in Flanders, said Sancho. Night now closed in more completely, and many lights began to flit through the wood, just as those fiery exhalations from the earth, that looked like shooting stars to our eyes, flit through the heavens. A frightful noise, too, was heard, like that made by the solid wheels the ox carts usually have, by the harsh, ceaseless creaking of which, they say, the bears and wolves are put to flight, if there happen to be any where they are passing. In addition to all this commotion, there came a further disturbance to increase the tumult, for now it seemed as if, in truth, on all four sides of the wood, 4 encounters or battles were going on at the same time. In one quarter resounded the dull voice of a terrible cannonade, in another numberless muskets were being discharged. The shouts of the combatants sounded almost close at hand, and farther away the Moorish lilies were raised again and again. In a word, the bugles, the horns, the clarions, the trumpets, the drums, the cannon, the musketry, and above all the tremendous noise of the carts, all made up together a din so confused and terrific that Don Quixote had need to summon up all his courage to brave it. But Sancho's gave way, and he fell fainting on the skirt of the Duchess' robe, who let him lie there and promptly bade him throw water in his face. This was done, and he came to himself by the time that one of the carts with the creaking wheels reached the spot. It was drawn by 4 plodding oxen, all covered with black housings. On each horn they had fixed a large lighted wax taper, and on the top of the cart was constructed a raised seat, on which sat a venerable old man with a beard whiter than the very snow, and so long that it fell below his waist. He was dressed in a long robe of black buckram, for as the cart was thickly set with the multitude of candles, it was easy to make out everything that was on it. Leading it were 2 hideous demons, also clad in buckram, with countenances so frightful that Sancho, having once seen them, shut his eyes so as not to see them again. As soon as the cart came opposite the spot, the old man rose from his lofty seat, and standing up said in a loud voice, I am the sage Legandio. And without another word, the cart then passed on. Behind it came another of the same form, with another aged man enthroned, who, stopping the cart, said in a voice no less solemn than that of the first, I am the sage Alquive, the great friend of Urganda the unknown, and passed on. Then another cart came by at the same pace, but the occupant of the throne was not old like the others, but a man stalwart and robust, and of a forbidding countenance, who as he came up said in a voice far hoarser and more devilish, I am the enchanter Archelaus, the mortal enemy of Amadis of Gaul and all his kindred, and then passed on. Having gone a short distance, the 3 carts halted, and the monotonous noise of their wheels ceased. and soon after they heard another, not noise, but sound of sweet harmonious music, of which Sancho was very glad, taking it to be a good sign, and said he to the Duchess, from whom he did not stir a step, or for a single instant, Signora, where there's music there can't be mischief. Nor were there lights, and it is bright, said the Duchess. To which Sancho replied, Fire gives light, and is bright where there are bonfires, as we see by those that are all round us and perhaps may burn us. But music is a sign of mirth and merrymaking. That remains to be seen, said Don Quixote, who was listening to all that passed, and he was right, as is shown in the following chapter.
好，呢一節咧就講伯爵夫婦帶住侍從兩人呢去打獵，森林打獵嘅過程就捉到野豬。之後嘅食宴嗰陣時候 ，Sancho 用佢好多嘅言語就去表明佢嘅心跡，佢都好抗拒打獵，覺得呢啲係有錢人嘅多餘玩意，或者係一啲閒人嘅遊戲。咁就似伯爵佢表示反對。當叫我哋企出嚟講啦，就你可唔可以唔好再用咁多呢啲咁嘅言語，真係好麻煩啊！咁但係伯爵夫人咧就跳出嚟咧辯護 Sancho， 就話咧咁樣嘅言語咧係好吸引佢，好有趣，亦都好惹笑。盛宴完畢之後咧，眾人騎住佢哋嘅座駕，諗住翻去城堡離開呢個森林，見到好多火光，有啲 Moorish 嘅叫鬧聲，就出現咗一隻自稱係魔鬼嘅人。佢咧就同眾人講啦，佢呢個魔鬼咧係引領住一班巫師，呢啲巫師咧就準備告訴眾人點樣幫 Dulcinea 咧去解除佢罪咒。伯爵夫就你想揾嘅當橋一提啦，你不如直接同佢講啦咁。魔鬼就話我咧就會帶啲巫師咧就會經過呢一度，佢哋陣間就會到，願唔願意喺度等我俾你下一步嘅指示啊？當橋一提就呢件事都好深沉，因為咧佢自己都唔記得之前喺洞穴裏面發生過嘅事，佢都好難去認證究竟係咪因為洞穴同呢啲魔鬼巫師有個交談而令到呢件事發生。但係無論點都好啦，佢都決定咧留喺度等。終於就出現幾個巫師啦，佢有自我介紹佢哋嘅名。咁但係下一步指示係點咧？就下回分解。我哋睇下呢一節有啲咩字同大家分享。Disenchant 文章入面咧嘅意思就係解咒嘅一個動詞啦。另外一個動詞嘅意思咧就係 cause someone to be disappointed， 令到人哋失望嘅。Discordant D-I-S-C-O-R-D-A-N-T 形容詞嚟嘅，呢個字有趣嘅，佢有三個解釋都不盡相同。第一個解釋係 disagreeing or incongruous， 唔協調、唔同意啦，意見相左嘅意思。第二嘅意思係 of sounds harsh and jarring because of lack of harmony， 同文中嘅意思相合啦，因為文中用 discordant 去形容魔鬼嘅聲線。第三個解釋 of a matched pair of subjects, especially twins, not having the same trait or disease， 形容雙生兒嘅。一啲孖生嘅，但係咧佢哋就冇類近病或者體質咁樣。呢個 discordant 喺文中嘅意思就係唔和諧。Stalwart S-T-A-L-W-A-R-T 係形容詞嚟嘅 ，loyal, reliable, hardworking。名詞咧就係 a loyal, reliable and hardworking supporter of or participant in an organization or team， 差唔多意思啦，形容一個忠誠可靠嘅一個人。都不一定係人嘅，形容忠誠可靠啦。好，讀到呢度，下一節撞低我哋聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2 嘅第35節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Wherein is continued the instruction given to Don Quixote touching the disenchantment of Dulcinea, together with other marvelous incidents。咁上回咧就講伯爵夫婦帶住使徒兩人去森林嗰度打獵，表面上係打獵，實際上伯爵夫婦要對當健我哋開一個玩笑。呢個玩笑就係叫人假扮成為巫師，就話俾使徒兩人聽咧，佢哋正想去為 Dulcinea 消除佢嘅咒語，令佢恢復過嚟。機緣巧合撞到當健我哋，咁當 Sancho 信以為真嘅時候咧， 巫師就即刻叫 Don Quixote 同埋 Sancho 就喺度等，喺度原地唔好喐，就等佢哋咧有下一步嘅指令。咁我哋睇下咧呢個下一步指令到底係咩啦
？They saw advancing towards them, to the sound of this pleasing music, what they call a triumphal car, drawn by 6 grey mules with white linen housings, on each of which was mounted a penitent, robed also in white, with a large lighted wax taper in his hand. The car was twice or perhaps 3 times as large as the former ones, and in front and on the side stood 12 more penitents, all as white as snow, and all with lighted tapers.A spectacle to excite fear as well as wonder, and on a raised throne was seated a nymph draped in a multitude of silver tissue veils with an embroidery of countless gold spangles glittering all over them, that made her appear, if not richly, at least brilliantly apparelled. She had her face covered with thin transparent sandal, the texture of which did not prevent the fair features of the maiden from being distinguished,while the numerous lights made it possible to judge of her beauty and of her years, which seemed to be not less than 17, but not to have yet reached 20. Beside her was a figure in a robe of state, as they call it, reaching to the feet, while the head was covered with a black veil. But the instant the car was opposite the Duke and Duchess and Don Quixote, the music of the clarion ceased, and then of the lutes and harps on the car, and the figure in the robe rose up,and flinging it apart and removing the veil from his face, disclosed to their eyes the shape of death itself, fleshless and hideous, at which sight Don Quixote felt uneasy, Sancho frightened, and the Duke and Duchess displayed a certain trepidation. Having risen to his feet, this living death, in a sleepy voice and with a tongue hardly awake, held forth as follows. I am that Merlin who, the legends say, the devil had for father and the lie,hath gathered credence with the lapse of time, of magic prince, of Zoroastic lore, monarch and treasurer with jealous eye. I view the efforts of the age to hide the gallant deeds of doughty errant knights, who are and ever have been dear to me. Enchanters and magicians in their kind are mostly hard of heart. Not so am I, for mine is tender, soft, compassionate, and its delight is doing good to all.In the dim caverns of the gloomy Dis, where tracing mystic lines and characters, my soul abideth now, there came to me the sorrow-laden plaint of her, the fair, the peerless Dulcinea del Toboso. I knew of her enchantment and her fate, from high-born dame to peasant wench transformed, and touched with pity first I turned the leaves of countless volumes of my devilish craft.And then in this grim grisly skeleton, myself encasing, hither have I come, to show where lies the fitting remedy, to give relief in such a piteous case. O thou, the pride and pink of all that I wear, the adamantine steel on shining light. O beacon, pole star, path and guide of all, who, scorning slumber and the lazy down, adopt the toilsome life of blood-stained arms.To thee, great hero, who all praise transcends, La Mancha's lustre and Iberia's star. Don Quixote, wisest brave, to thee I say, for peerless Dulcinea del Toboso, her pristine form and beauty to regain, this needful that thy esquire Sancho shall, on his own sturdy buttocks bear to heaven, 3,300 lashes lay, and that they smart and sting and hurt him well.Thus have the authors of her woe resolved, and this is, gentles, wherefore I have come. By all that's good, exclaimed Sancho at this. I'll just as soon give myself 3 snaps with a dagger as 3, not to say 3,000 lashes. The devil takes such a way of disenchanting. I don't see what my backside has got to do with enchantments. By God, if Signor Merlin has not found out some other way of disenchanting the lady Dulcinea del Toboso, she may go to her grave enchanted.But I'll take you, Don Clown stuffed with garlic, said Don Quixote, and tie you to a tree as naked as when your mother brought you forth, and give you, not to say 3,300, but 6,600 lashes, and so well laid on that they won't be got rid of if you try 3,300 times. Don't answer me a word, or I'll tell your soul out. On hearing this, Merlin said, That will not do, For the lashes worthy Sancho has to receive must be given of his own free will and not by force, and at whatever time he pleases, for there is no fixed limit assigned to him. But it is permitted him, if he likes to commute by half the pain of this whipping, to let them be given by the hand of another, though it may be somewhat weighty. Not a hand, my own or anybody else's, weighty or weighable, shall touch me, said Sancho. Was it I that gave birth to the lady Dulcinea de Toboso, that my backside is to pay for the sins of her eyes? My master, indeed, that's a part of her, for he's always calling her my life and my soul, and his stay and prop. Maiden ought to whip himself for her and take all the trouble required for her disenchantment. But for me to whip myself, not for me. As soon as Sancho had done speaking, the nymph in silver that was at the side of Merlin's ghost stood up, and removing the thin veil from her face, disclosed one that seemed to all something more than exceedingly beautiful, and with a masculine freedom from embarrassment, and in a voice not very like a lady's, addressing Sancho directly, said, Thou wretched squire, soul of a pitcher, heart of a cork tree, with bowels of flint and pebbles, if, thou impudent thief, they bade thee throw thyself down from some lofty tower, if, enemy of mankind, they asked thee to swallow 12 of toads, 2 of lizards, and 3 of adders, if they wanted thee to slay thy wife and children with a sharp murderous scimitar, it would be no wonder for thee to show thyself stubborn and squeamish. But to make a piece of work about 3,300 lashes, what every poor little charity boy gets every month, it is enough to amaze, astonish, astound the compassionate bowels of all who hear it, nay, all who come to hear it in the course of time. Turn, O miserable, hard-hearted animal, turn, I say, those timorous owl's eyes upon these of mine that are compared to radiant stars, and thou wilt see them weeping, trickling streams and rills, and tracing burrows, tracks, and paths over the fair fields of my cheeks. Let it move thee, crafty, ill-conditioned monster, to see my blooming youth, still in its teens, for I am not yet 20, wasting and withering away beneath the husk of a rude peasant wench. And if I do not appear in that shape now, it is a special favour Signor Merlin here has granted me, to the sole end that my beauty may soften thee. For the tears of beauty in distress turn rocks into cotton and tigers into ewes. Lay unto that hide of thine, thou great untamed brute, rouse up thy lusty figure that only urges thee to eat and eat, and set free the softness of my flesh, the gentleness of my nature, and the fairness of my face. And if thou wilt not relent or come to reason for me, do so for the sake of that poor knight thou hast beside thee, thy master I mean, whose soul I can this moment see, how he has it stuck in his throat, not 10 fingers from his lips, and only waiting for thy inflexible or yielding reply to make its escape by his mouth and go back again into his stomach. Don Quixote, on hearing this, felt his throat, and turning to the Duke, he said, By God, Signor, Dulcinea says true. I have my soul stuck here in my throat like nut of a crossbow. What say you to this, Sancho? Said the Duchess. I say, Signora, returned Sancho, what I said before. As for the lashes, not for me. Not me, you should say, Sancho, and not as you do, said the Duke. Let me alone, your highness, said Sancho. I'm not in a humour now to look into niceties, or a letter more or less. For these lashes that are to be given me, or I'm to give myself, have to upset me, that I don't know what I'm saying or doing. But I'd like to know of this lady, my lady Dulcinea de Toboso, where she learned this way she has of asking favours. She comes to ask me to score my flesh with lashes, and she calls me soul of a pitcher, and great untamed brute, and a string of foul names that the devil is welcome to. Is my flesh brass, or is it anything to me whether she is enchanted or not? Does she bring with her a basket of fair linen, shirts, kerchiefs, socks, not that I wear any, to coax me? No, nothing but one piece of abuse after another, though she knows the proverb they have here, that an ass loaded with gold goes lightly up a mountain, and that gifts break rocks, and praying to God and plying the hammer, and that one take is better than 2, I'll give these. Then there's my master, who ought to stroke me down and pet me to make me turn wool and carded cotton. He says if he gets hold of me, he'll tie me naked to a tree and double a tail of lashes on me. These tender-hearted gentry should consider that it's not merely a squire, but a governor they are asking to whip himself, just as if it was drink with cherries. Let them learn, plague take them. the right way to ask and beg and behave themselves, for all times are not alike, nor are people always in good humor. I am now ready to burst with grief at seeing my green coat torn, and they come to ask me to whip myself of my own free will, I having as little fancy for it as for turning cacique. Well then, the fact is, friend Sancho, said the Duke, that unless you become softer than a ripe fig, you shall not get hold of the government. It would be a nice thing for me to send my islanders a cruel governor with flinty bowels, who won't yield to the tears of afflicted damsels or to the prayers of wise, magisterial, ancient enchanters and sages. In short, Sancho, either you must be whipped by yourself, or they must whip you, or you shan't be governor. Signor, said Sancho, won't 2 days' grace be given me in which to consider what is best for me? No, certainly not, said Merlin. Here, this minute, and on the spot, the matter must be settled. Either Dulcinea will return to the cave of Montesinos and to her former condition of peasant wench, or else, in her present form, shall be carried to the Elysian fields, where she will remain waiting until the number of stripes is completed. Now then, Sancho, said the Duchess, show courage and gratitude for your master Don Quixote's bread that you have eaten. We are all bound to oblige and please him for his benevolent disposition and lofty chivalry. Consent to this whipping, my son, to the devil with the devil, and leave fear to milksops, for a stout heart breaks bad luck, as you very well know. To this Sancho replied with an irrelevant remark, which, addressing Merlin, he made to him. Will your worship tell me, Signor Merlin, when that courier devil came up, he gave my master a message from Signor Montesinos, charging him to wait for him here, as he was coming to arrange how the Lady Dulcinea del Toboso was to be disenchanted. But up to the present, we have not seen Montesinos, nor anything like him. To which Merlin made answer, the devil, Sancho, is a blockhead and a great scoundrel. I sent him to look for your master, but not with a message from Montesinos, but from myself. For Montesinos is in his cave expecting, or more properly speaking, waiting for his disenchantment. For there's the tail to be skinned yet for him. If he owes you anything, or you have any business to transact with him, I'll bring him to you and put him where you choose. But for the present, make up your mind to consent to this penance, and believe me, it will be very good for you, for soul as well for body. For your soul, because of the charity with which you perform it, for your body, because I know that you are of a sanguine habit, and it will do you no harm to draw a little blood. There are a great many doctors in the world, even the enchanters are doctors, said Sancho. However, as everybody tells me the same thing, though I can't see it myself, I say I'm willing to give myself the 3,300 lashes, provided I am to lay them on whenever I like, without any fixing of days or times, and I'll try and get out of debt as quickly as I can, that the world may enjoy the beauty of the Lady Dulcinea del Toboso, as it seems, contrary to what I thought, that she is beautiful after all. It must be a condition, too, that I am not to be bound to draw blood with the scourge, and that if any of the lashes happen to be fly flappers, they are to count. Item that, in case I should make any mistake in the reckoning, Signor Merlin, as he knows everything, is to keep count, and let me know how many are still wanting or over the number. There will be no need to let you know of any over, said Merlin, because when you reach the full number, the Lady Dulcinea will at once, and that very instant, be disenchanted, and will come in her gratitude to seek out the worthy Sancho and thank him, and even reward him for the good work. So you have no cause to be uneasy about stripes, too many or too few. Heaven forbid I should cheat anyone of even a hair of his head. Well then, in God's hands be it, said Sancho. In the hard case I'm in, I give in. I say I accept the penance on the conditions laid down. The instant Sancho uttered these last words, the music of the clarion struck up once more, and again a host of muskets were discharged, and Don Quixote hung on Sancho's neck, kissing him again and again on the forehead and cheeks. The Duchess and the Duke expressed the greatest satisfaction. The car began to move on, and as it passed, the fair Dulcinea bowed to Duke and Duchess and made a low courtesy to Sancho. And now bright smiling dawn came on apace. The flowers of the field revived, raised up their heads, and the crystal waters of the brooks, murmuring over the grey and white pebbles, hastened to pay their tribute to the expectant rivers. The glad earth, the unclouded sky, the fresh breeze, the clear light, each and all showed that the day that came treading on the skirts of morning would be calm and bright. The Duke and Duchess, pleased with their hunt and at having carried out their plans so cleverly and successfully, returned to their castle resolved to follow up their joke, for to them there was no reality that could afford them more amusement.
好，咁呢一節終於知道咗呢個玩笑到底係咩啦。喺森林入面出現咗嘅所謂巫師，就係一個自稱魔鬼嘅人，而Dulcinea de Toboso自己咧都喺度喎。呢個魔鬼就要對 Sancho 作出一個交易，為咗換取Dulcinea嘅解咒，令佢恢復美麗嘅樣貌、尊貴嘅血統啦。Sancho 咧就需要鞭打自己，或者俾人鞭打3300下。呢個數目都幾驚人。Sancho 一聽到咧，當然就係即時拒絕啦，因為佢係好怕受傷害啊。咁但係就此咧，包括當Don Quixote伯爵夫婦都同 Sancho 講，你應該咁做喎。而魔鬼亦都說服緊 Sancho， 即係同佢講，為咗你嘅主人，為咗你自己對你好㗎呢樣嘢，打自己。咁 Sancho 點會對我好啊？伯爵夫婦就同佢講，如果你唔咁做咧，之前應承你俾你做正義呢啲嘢咧，我哋都會收翻，必須咧要做呢樣嘢。Sancho 之後咧退咗一步，就話不如你哋俾我自己揀幾時打咩位，我應承你啦，我會盡快打晒噶啦。不過咧，你哋都要安排一個人喺度數住，唔好到時打多咗。魔鬼就話你放心。當我哋打夠一個數目咧，Dulcinea de Toboso即時就會回復佢原本樣貌，佢都會衝過嚟你嘅跟前，對你作出道謝。所以呢個咧，你係唔需要擔心嘅。Sancho 再諗完之後咧，就話唉，冇辦法啦，唯有咁做啦。魔鬼隊伍咧就吹走佢嘅幕氣，好開心啦，大慶祝。當Quixote對 Sancho 啊瘋狂緋聞，瘋狂喺度錫佢，伯爵夫婦亦都非常之高興。知道嚟就係要打 Sancho 啦，咁佢哋咧就此咧就樂之不疲，大家咧就翻去佢哋嘅城堡度咧就準備執行刑罰。好，我哋睇下呢一節有啲咩字同大家分享。有兩個好似常用嘅字，但其實咧佢有好多解釋嘅，係幾有趣。第一個字 abide，abide 通常用嘅遵從一啲規矩 ，accept or act in accordance with a rule, decision or recommendation。呢啲常用嘅，或者係逗留某個地方嘅停留。但係咧，原來呢個字咧就有其他解釋嘅。Be able to tolerate someone or something， 有個容忍嘅意思喺度。又或者 of a feeling or memory，continue without fading or being lost。所以同停留、逗留、滯留有啲關係啦，一個停留不息嘅意思。Sanguine S-A-N-G-U-I-N-E 形容詞。Optimistic or positive, especially in an apparently bad or difficult situation， 非常樂天嘅性格啊。另外兩個意思 ，blood red 喺度顏色啦，血紅色，又或者 bloody or bloodthirsty。文中咧就提到魔鬼斷定 Sancho 係唔怕鞭打嘅，因為佢隱含住一個好血嘅性格，所以你冇所謂啦咁樣。但係 Sancho 咧就唔認為啦，當然。第三個字 apace A-P-A-C-E。副詞嚟嘅 ，swiftly quickly 飛快嘅意思咧，迅速。仲有就係 at the same speed or rate as， 有一種追上人哋嘅速度咁嘅意思嘅。好，我哋今次讀到呢度，下一次仲得讀你聽，拜拜。